The story began with a boy getting isekai'd bare feet. Well, you might be wondering how he ended up this way. Well, let's rewind a few minutes. His name is Lin, though not the one you're probably thinking of. Perhaps the Lin who can summon a legion of skeletons is from a different story altogether. Let's just call him Forrest for now. Anyway, our boy Forrest right now is just one of the countless unemployed otaku who's fresh out of college. Relatable, right? Just like any other day, he was browsing the web, however. A series of pop-ups suddenly appeared on his screen, similar to the ones that you might see after visiting a website you're not supposed to. The pop-ups asked him a weird question, like if he was tired of life, and if he wanted to experience more thrill life. Without a second thought, he closed the pop-ups. Hey, the dude is an otaku. Just because he is unemployed, a loner, has no money, and is a virgin, it does not mean he doesn't enjoy his life. Well, clearly the isekai gods don't take a no for an answer. What followed was his computer froze, and then in the next second, the screen exploded and sucked him inside. Okay, looks like no truck-kun was needed today. Forrest felt like he was floating in midair, and a voice resonated in his mind, calling him master and congratulating him on making the right choice. It promised to serve him as the divine ascension system. Tears welled up in Forrest's eyes as he frantically tried to rip the pop-up apart while protesting that he hadn't agreed to anything. But no matter how much he screamed, he heard nothing but his own echo. The next moment, we find ourselves in the year 2696 at the Starshine Academy. As the information settled into Forrest's mind, looks like he had isekai'd into another world. Turned out, in the year 2666, an unexpected alien invasion struck Earth, catching humanity completely off guard and wreaking devastation. After hundreds of years of warfare, every country on Earth formed a federation, and finally wiped out the alien creatures using powerful nuclear weapons. But the virus they left behind swept across the globe. The survivors began to undergo evolution, and they began to pursue martial cultivation. These people are known as the new generation of martial artists. Just as Forrest was still trying to figure out what the hell just happened, the door was violently kicked open. In walked Dalton, a towering and muscular dude, also Forrest's roommate, and an entry-level martial artist. Seeing Forrest still lying in bed, Dalton quickly realized why the meal he had told Forrest to deliver hadn't arrived. Clearly, Forrest had been the victim of bullying for a long time. Dalton grabbed Forrest by the collar and hoisted him up. Turned out that our protagonist has no talent for a martial artist. In the next moment, Dalton threw him against the wall, causing a massive impact that even cracked a good chunk of the wall. Two more guys entered the room, but when they saw this, they merely chuckled, knowing too well that even the Academy's higher-ups would turn a blind eye when they saw this. Dalton stepped on Forrest's hand to make sure he was fully conscious. Forrest could feel the pain but couldn't comprehend what was happening. He opened his eyes slowly and saw a man sneering at him. Forrest coughed twice and tried to stand up resolutely, though the pain was excruciating as if his bones would snap. However, Dalton for some reason saw this as provoking him. He then kicked Forrest in the stomach, sending him crashing into the wall once more. Forrest couldn't understand. Whether that's in novels or anime, the protagonists who get transported to isekai usually have a decent time, but why was he so unlucky? His mind was suddenly flooded with unfamiliar yet recognizable memories. He was being bullied because he lacked talent, and mocked by the principal who thought he was wasting resources. Worthless. Garbage. Go die. These were the words people had said to him. Holding his head, he understood why this body's previous owner had felt so hopeless, but it seems like the previous owner had found his relief, and this pile of mess is up to Forrest to handle. He glared at the group in the distance. He's not the same type of guy anymore, as he swore that he wouldn't let himself be humiliated ever again. The group noticed his gaze, and Dalton delivered another punch to Forrest's abdomen. Every time Forrest stood up, Dalton relentlessly attacked him, even using his knee while raining punches down on Forrest's face. Forrest spat out a mouthful of blood at Dalton, still defiant. Dalton wiped and glanced at the blood on his face, his expression turning icy cold. Forrest shook his head. He thought he had a system. Where was it? Just as he asked the question in his mind, a voice echoed, reminding him that his rage gauge was now fully charged at 100%. His personal info appeared before him. Turned out he was only level 1, with his stats barely above 30, while the average person's stats should be around 38. Not only was he not a proper martial artist, but it was also clear that Forrest's body was incredibly weak. However, He had a special skill, the eye of analysis, and his rage charge was fully loaded. The system's voice echoed again, asking if he wanted to unleash the charged strike. Hearing this, Forrest was stunned for a moment before shouting loudly, "Boost me!" Just then, Forrest's and Dalton's fists collided midair. Dalton barely had time to react before feeling his bones shattering. The next second, he was sent flying. With a thunderous crash, Dalton was slammed against the wall, his eyes rolling back as he lost consciousness. The two guys watched in disbelief, rushing to Dalton before turning back to Forrest, trembling on their feet. Forrest let out an angry roar at them, and they hurriedly lifted Dalton and fled. Forrest leaned against the wall, feeling the searing pain all over his body. The charged strike had also taken a toll on him, leaving his arm bleeding profusely. He could barely stay on his feet and eventually slumped to the floor. The system then informed him that by defeating his opponent with a charged strike, he had earned a lucky draw. A sudden surge of energy jolted him awake, and he quickly confirmed. A large spinning wheel appeared before him, offering various rewards, including a golden glowing grand prize at the very center. As the draw started, the pointer spun rapidly at first and gradually slowed down before landing on 10,000 Federation coins. Although it wasn't the best prize, it was exactly what Forrest needed right now. He slowly made his way to the school's infirmary. A woman wearing glasses and a white lab coat seemed to recognize him immediately. Forrest was puzzled as he was sure he had never seen her before. The woman giggled softly as she approached him. "Who doesn't know little Forrest? The worst student in the academy," she teased. Forrest blushed suddenly, unsure why. He stammered out, saying he wasn't small. The woman's gaze trailed down slowly, and she smirked. "Oh, really?" While followed up saying, "We'll see soon enough." She then tells him to strip down and lay down for a thorough examination. As the shy and inexperienced young man that he is, Forrest clutches his pants tightly. Just as the manhua was about to get 18+, the woman licked her lips and threw him a playful wink, telling Forrest that she was joking. He doesn't have to take everything off, but she certainly wouldn't mind if he did. Oof, this just made our boy blush even more. Either way, once inside the recovery chamber, Forrest opted for the 9,800 Federation coin treatment. He glanced at the various scars covering his body and realized that the original owner of this body had suffered far more than he'd imagined. Taking a deep breath, he clenched his fists and vowed that it would never happen again. He soon felt the recovery fluid gradually enveloping his entire body. The process took several hours, and he quickly fell asleep. Hours passed, meanwhile, in Class 29. The teacher told the students there were only 20 spots available in Zone A20 battle training, which any entry-level martial artist could compete for. When he asked where was Dalton, soon enough he learned that Dalton was currently undergoing surgery. The teacher was stunned as Dalton's friends explained that Forrest had broken all of Dalton's ribs and arms. Suddenly, one of the students nearby burst out laughing, and the rest quickly joined in, finding the joke too funny. The guy tried to explain he wasn't lying, but the teacher rubbed his forehead and let out a sigh. It was then Forrest walked into the classroom and asked the teacher if he could take the spot heading to Zone A20 instead. Everyone turned to look at him. The teacher, perhaps noticing something different about him today, warned that Zone A20 was incredibly dangerous and didn't recommend Forrest to go, as he isn't even an entry-level martial artist yet. Then, another male student in the class began mocking Forrest. Forrest wasn't mad, but rather smiled, while pointing at the student, asking the teacher, if he can beat him, will he then be allowed to go? The short-haired boy who was mocking him was stunned for a moment, before narrowing his eyes, slamming the desk, and accepting the challenge. Forrest activated the Eye of Analysis, as the student's information appeared. Entry-level martial artist, strength 52, vitality 41, speed 37, combat power 443. He did some quick comparison, and it seemed that this guy was slightly weaker than Dalton. The two agreed to meet at the training ground after class. Soon, the entire class had gathered in the training ground, while most had thought that Forrest had lost his mind. A chubby student accompanied Forrest to the training ground, the only person in the class who never looked down on him. Forrest waved to reassure his friend not to worry. This guy who accepted his challenge is Jasper, who had bullied Forrest many times before, and now was the perfect opportunity for some revenge. As soon as Forrest stepped onto the stage, Jasper was the first to attack. Forrest blocked with both hands but still felt a sharp pain shoot through his arms. However, Jasper's punch instantly pushed Forrest's rage gauge to 20 points. Forrest kept dodging and defending while Jasper grew increasingly enraged. Some students laughed at Forrest and began calling him a wuss, but Forrest didn't care, as he knew that his rage gauge had already reached 70%. The teacher remained silent but was visibly surprised. He knew Forrest was great academically, and on books, however, he simply didn't have the martial arts talent, and had been a frequent target of bullying in class and throughout the academy. But today, perhaps it was the first time he'd seen such determination in Forrest's eyes. Forrest dodged another punch, and this time his rage gauge hit its peak. The system's voice asked if he wanted to use a charged strike. Without hesitation, Forrest confirmed, and Jasper, now furious, charged forward with another powerful punch. Forrest responded with a powerful punch of his own. As the two fists collided, a gust of wind spread outwards. What followed was a howl of pain rang out as Jasper was sent flying and crashed hard outside the stage. Everyone stood up in shock, just to see Jasper coughing repeatedly, while blood poured out from his nose and mouth with every breath. He then began yelling, "Impossible! Impossible! Forrest is just a useless nobody." His arm hung down and bent in an unnatural shape, clearly twisted and broken. Forrest looked down at Jasper from the stage, then questioned him. If he was beaten by a useless nobody, then what does that make him? The teacher was the first to react, urging a few students to take Jasper for immediate treatment. He then laughed heartily and began to applaud. "Forrest, you've certainly surprised us all." Forrest smiled and turned around, as this was simply his first step. Zone A20 is an area located to the north of the city. This area has been contaminated by nuclear radiation and plagued by viruses, surrounded by zombies and mutated beasts. Despite the danger, it also holds opportunities, as the bodies of these mutated beasts are valuable materials, and the crystals in their brains can help martial artists improve their cultivation. The teacher led the class and told them to gather around. He told them that with their extensive training, combat gear, and weapons provided by the academy, they were well prepared to handle low-tier zombies and beasts. However, they first needed to conquer their inner fears, as every year, some students freeze up at the sight of zombies and only ended up being dinner for the zombies. The teacher encouraged the students, reminding them that only through real combat could they test their true skills and grow stronger. The chub nervously asked Forrest if he was scared. Forrest shook his head. Why should he be? These zombies and beasts are nothing but experiences for him. The students grouped themselves into teams of 4. Before heading out, the teacher cautioned them not to venture too deep into the zone, as the creatures there were far beyond their capabilities. After a while, as Forrest's team approached and surveyed the area, one of the members scoffed and told Forrest not to drag them down. Chubb retorted disdainfully. Their bickering was cut off by Forrest, who scanned the surroundings and noticed something was approaching them. The other 2 members broke into a cold sweat and gulped nervously. From a vine-covered building nearby, something emerged. The team quickly prepared for combat as a grotesque monster burst through the mist. Forrest immediately activated his eye of analysis and identified it as a Tier 1 zombie, slow-moving, razor-sharp teeth, virus carrier. Combat power, 380. Forrest's previous fights had raised his combat power to 291, however he was still far behind the zombie. The 2 of them stood at the back and hesitated with fear, but Forrest knew this was his chance. He needed experience, and he needed to grow stronger. While his teammates stood frozen in confusion, Forrest brandished his razor-sharp blade and charged directly at the zombie, slicing through its shoulder and cleaving its body in 2. Well, that was easier than expected. He gained 200 experience points and leveled up, earning 2 potential points. Without hesitation, he added them into strength. At that moment, several more zombies appeared from higher ground, and Chubb quickly warned Forrest. Forrest turned around just in time to see the guy from his team raising his weapons and charging forward. With powerful slashes, he swiftly took down the approaching zombies. The other guy then ran over while complimenting him and mocking Forrest and Chubb for not reacting quickly enough, totally forgetting the fact that he was just as frightened and froze to the ground just a moment earlier. Forrest paid them no mind, only lamenting how he missed out on the experiences. However, the group continued onward. The city was now overgrown with vines and trees, hiding its former urban landscape. While they marveled at how this had once been a thriving human settlement, something else appeared in the distance. One of the guys thought it was just another Tier 1 zombie and wanted to show off. Forrest activated the Eye of Analysis and identified the figure as a Tier 1 zombie leader. Fast-moving, razor-sharp claws and teeth, capable of summoning Tier 1 zombies. Combat power, 580. Chubb didn't want the other guy to take all the credit and stepped forward too, but Forrest held him back. However, the dude didn't seem to be bothered, while still confident even though this zombie appeared slightly larger than the previous ones. Next second, the zombie leader moved with incredible speed, and before the guy could react, he was sent flying by a powerful tackle. While hitting the ground, the zombie leader opened its gaping maw and began biting on him. Fitz, the other guy on the team, quickly intervened, kicking the zombie leader away before leaping to finish it off. Forrest urgently called out to Fitz, telling him to kill the zombie in one hit, otherwise the zombie leader would summon more zombies. However, Fitz clearly didn't want to have Forrest tell him what to do, and because of that, he underestimated the zombie leader. He swung his sword, however it was dodged, and he only managed to sever the zombie leader's arm. Then, the zombie leader let out a deafening howl that echoed through the forest. Fitz hurriedly retreated, but within moments, countless zombies erupted from the ground and quickly surrounded the group. Fitz began to panic, his face turning pale with fear as he called for Mommy, saying he didn't want to die here. Without missing a moment, he bolted in the direction of the fewest zombies. The other guy almost pissed his pants, also sprinting and following closely behind. Chubb urged Forrest to run too, but after a moment of silence, Forrest shook his head, telling Chubb to go without him. Drawing his sword, he knew that if he went all out, he might just gain a few levels. Chubb tried to pull him back, but was too slow as Forrest charged forward, weapons swinging relentlessly, each time a zombie fell under his sword. Chubb watched Forrest and noticed how unfamiliar he was. He wondered if was this still the Forrest he knew. Either way, seeing Forrest fight so fiercely, he also picked up his weapon and yelled out, "Screw it! I ain't leave a brother behind." The two then stood back to back, cutting down the zombie horde that surged like a tidal wave. Suddenly, the zombie leader lunged at Forrest. He had no time to react before being pounced and pinned to the ground. Chubb panicked as the zombie leader opened its large maw to bite Forrest. Forrest used all his strength and managed to land a kick on the leader's head, and at that moment, realizing that he was now level 5 and gained 12 potential points in total. He quickly allocated all the points to strength, boosting his power to 50. A surge of immense power filled Forrest's body, and he gripped the zombie leader's head with both hands, twisting it with all his might. He then kicked the leader away, but it wasn't enough. Seizing the moment, Forrest picked up a blade from the ground and leaped off the ground. With one swift strike, he decapitated the zombie leader, ending the threat for good. The system notification indicated that Forrest had leveled up to 6, gaining 6 potential points and unlocking the gene lock system. He checked his stats, noting his combat power had increased to 380, and his rage gauge was also fully charged. The surrounding zombies had all been taken care of by him and Chubb. Forrest then allocated the newly acquired potential points to speed and vitality, but he was particularly curious about the gene lock. He had heard that a significant portion of human genes remains untapped, holding vast potential that humanity has yet to unleash. The so-called gene lock refers to this latent potential. Legend has it that those who fully unlock the gene lock can attain godlike powers. Excited, Forrest clicked on the icon for the first gene lock, only to be warned that he needed to be at least level 15. He cursed under his breath, but figured level 15 shouldn't be too hard to reach as long as he continued slaying zombies. Chubb then turned to him curiously and asked Forrest if he was still the same person he knew, marveling at how he had become so strong and even managed to kill the zombie leader. Forrest struck a confident pose before he could say anything, only to see Chubb rolling his eyes. They continued deeper into the area and soon came across a sign that read, "Entry-level martial artists prohibited beyond this point." They knew this marked the danger zone that the teacher had warned them about. Chubb suggested they head back, but Forrest hesitated, knowing he desperately needed more experience. Plus, they hadn't encountered any zombies for some time. As Forrest pondered the decision to return, Chubb nervously tapped his shoulder. The next second, Forrest's eyes widened as he noticed a massive snake, perhaps a python, coiled high up in the trees. To make matters worse, the Eye of Analysis couldn't detect any information about the creature. Clearly, the gap between them was too great to be analyzed. Sweating profusely, Forrest and Chubb cautiously began to retreat. The giant python lunged at the two, but the two managed to dodge just in time. Forrest quickly drew its attention and urged Chubb to run. After running for a few moments, Forrest regretted his decision. Chubb ran as far as he could before realizing that Forrest had drawn the snake to the opposite side. He then thought, "Wait a second. Hold on. That's the Forbidden Ruins." On the other side, Forrest himself didn't know how far he had run, but eventually found a hiding spot. He couldn't see the snake anymore, but remained on high alert, and from the textbooks, he knew that the python sometimes could camouflage itself. Just as Forrest caught his breath, someone brandished a crossbow and pointed at him, then ordered him to not move. Several people in combat gear eyed Forrest suspiciously, asking what he was up to. Recognizing his gear was from the academy, they realized he was a student. Forrest quickly explained that he had strayed too far by mistake. Judging by their looks and gear, it was clear they were a small adventure team. Turned out, they weren't interested in killing Forrest, but were eyeing his weapon. Forrest cautioned them that without his weapon, he would be defenseless. One of them grew impatient and decided to kill Forrest on the spot, but Forrest suddenly shouted and pointed behind the man. Annoyed, the man glanced back just in time to see the giant python lunge at him, swallowing him whole before he could react. The scene was so gruesome that it left the team in brief shock. The team quickly realized this was a Tier 3 evolved beast and drew their weapons. A middle-aged man, clearly the captain of the team, urged them not to panic, telling them that the snake is worth millions if they could kill the beast. Greed gleamed in everyone's eyes as they all drew their weapon. Forrest watched from the back, hiding behind a wall. He noticed they were all Tier 1 martial artists, thinking it was way too reckless for them to go up against a Tier 3 evolved beast purely for money. He intended to grab his weapon and then just run off, but just then, an arrow found its mark in the python's belly. The snake whipped its tail, sending the attacker flying instantly, killing him. A bald man then raised a greatsword and stabbed at the snake, but was doused in a torrent of green liquid from the snake's mouth, instantly melting his arm and slowly his body. The middle-aged man shouted for everyone to focus on the python's belly, as that was the only weak spot. They attacked desperately, and one fell after another, and finally, with a loud crash, the giant python collapsed to the ground, and the only person left erupted into victorious laughter. As Forrest bent down to pick up his weapon and was about to leave, the middle-aged man noticed him. He sneered, already knowing it was Forrest who had lured the giant python toward them. Instead of killing Forrest outright, he ordered him to skin the python and retrieve the crystal core. However, Forrest chuckled, observing the lifeless bodies around them. The captain was the only one alive, and he didn't seem to be in the greatest shape either. Forrest said he would do what the man said, but however, he would not hand it over, and rather considered these spoils to be his own. When the captain realized Forrest had seen through his intentions, he then lunged at him. However, tired and perhaps a bit too overconfident, Forrest had easily predicted his movements. Forrest sidestepped to dodge the strike while swinging the blade at the man's arm, cutting it off. The man screamed and lost his balance. Shocked and scared, the man staggered back, trying to intimidate Forrest with the name of the Zhang family. However, Forrest paid no heed to this supposed Zhang family, since these people had tried to steal his weapon and kill him just moments earlier. Letting him leave would be the stupidest idea ever. Without missing a beat, Forrest delivered a fatal blow, killing the man. System notified, defeating a Tier 1 martial artist earned Forrest 2,500 experience points, leveling him up to 7. He also received a lucky draw for killing his first martial artist. He then distributed the potential points evenly between stamina and speed. Forrest then began dissecting the python and soon found a shimmering crystal core in its brain. He knew it was going to sell good money. He then searched the adventurers' backpacks and found 2 more Tier 2 cores, along with other items, all packed and ready to go. Continuing in what he thought was the original direction, it was long after that he realized he was going the wrong way when he stumbled upon a sign that read, "Danger Zone." Clearly, he was way too deep. He wanted to leave when a tremendous roar echoed through the forest. The beast's howl nearly made Forrest's legs give way as he covered his ears and looked toward the forest. A Tier 4 lightning leopard was not far from him. Forrest wanted to run, but his legs gave out. Then he noticed a girl walking towards the leopard, wearing a full combat suit with a long sword at her waist. She was very young but didn't have much emotion on her face. She looked determined as she approached the lightning leopard. Turned out, She was a Tier 4 martial artist. In the next moment, she slashed down with her sword, unleashing a crescent-shaped wave of white energy. To counter it, the lightning leopard generated a shield of electricity around itself to block the attack, and then charged toward the girl. They exchanged rapid blows until she found an opening and landed a strike on the leopard's neck, sending it flying several meters away. Wow! So this was the power of a high-tier martial artist. Forrest's blood boiled at the sight. The lightning leopard was severely injured, barely able to stand. The girl approached it slowly, ready to finish it off, but suddenly, the beast flipped itself up and released a massive burst of lightning above it. The girl tried to block it with her sword, but the lightning ball caught her off guard, and the resulting explosion was so powerful that it sent her flying over the nearby cliff. Forrest was stunned. He hadn't expected the lightning leopard to have so much intelligence. It played dead only to deliver a fatal blow in return, or perhaps it was a desperate last-ditch effort. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his mind. If he could finish the leopard off now, he would get credit for the kill. He excitedly approached the beast, observing it carefully before raising his sword. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine as he noticed another lightning leopard in the trees above. Greed had made him momentarily forget that these creatures often moved in pairs. He knew he had goofed and began to flee. The second lightning leopard let out a deafening roar, seemingly convinced Forrest was responsible for her mate's death. Forrest ran to the edge of the cliff with the beast hot on his heels. He said his last plea, arguing that he wasn't the one responsible. But clearly, it wasn't enough. He then raised his sword, as if preparing for a final stand. You think he was about to give a last-ditch effort? Nope, that isn't happening. He turned around and jumped off. To him, it's better to die from the fall than be mauled to death by the enraged female leopard.